We're ready when you are, Mayor Bennett.
Okay, you tell me when you're ready. Just go ahead. I'll call this meeting then of the City of Salem Legislative Policy Committee to or Legislative Committee to order, and present are Bennett.
Hoy.
Stapleton.
Gonzalez.
Okay, great. Stapleton is our alternate sitting in for Councillor Phillips. Good. Welcome, Councillor.
Thanks.
Okay, Courtney, you want to take us through this?
Yes, thank you so much. I'd be happy to. What we'd like to do today is hear a little bit from Justin Martin about the staging for the coming session and what he's been up to of late. We'll take a quick tour through the policy statements that we're proposing to guide our positions on the 2023 legislative session and the bills that we expect to come forward. We'll also look briefly at the priorities that we're hoping are acceptable to the Legislative Committee as a recommendation to the City Council. And then we'll get a quick update, really brief update on this idea of having the authority to move tents and structures from unreasonable locations. We'll just get an update on the timeline for that piece. And then we'll hear from you about any other issues of concern.
Okay. Justin, you want to start off?
Sure thing. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Mayor-elect and council members. Good to see you all. Not a ton of stuff happening in terms of policy right now with the legislature. That being said, obviously agencies are working on their budgets. The administration is working on that final December budget, which is key. But as we all know, that's a big printed piece of paper. That's a moving document. And once it's printed, actually this year, it's not going to be printed for the first time ever, right? Once it's released, it's kind of worth what it's worth, right? And then that kicks off the whole process. As everybody knows, there's going to be a new administration. So these will obviously lay a few guidelines out there, but expect that to change as we see it. In terms of politics, there's a ton going on, as everybody knows, and as we are all inundated with commercials and mail and polls on our phone. I always wait to vote so I can see all the mail coming in and hopefully get some phone calls to see what people are polling about. But we're looking at about 46 days until the election. And as everybody knows here in Oregon, it's actually a shorter time than that because ballots go out early in a vote by mail state. So we're looking at about 25 days from that happening. So looking forward to that. Recently, I've met with all of legislative leadership. So the speaker, the majority leader in the House, as well as the majority leader in the Senate, who has a potential to become the Senate president, and both co-chairs of Ways and Means. So the nice thing about that, I'm able to talk a little bit about some things that I know we will have coming down the pike. I will be on a goodwill tour, and I'm sure the elected officials on the call today understand what a goodwill tour is. I will be meeting with all of those elected officials, almost everyone within the process that's up for election over the course of the next month. And as you've probably heard me say ad nauseum, I will be ringing the bell, continuing to let them know about our messaging and what our priorities are going to be coming into the legislative session. So I'm excited about today's meeting to get specific on those priorities, to get those approvals, and really start having more in-depth conversations with those elected officials, especially once they are elected again. As you guys probably remember, I was a broken record when it came to our $20 million in funding that we got for water years ago, pre-pandemic. So we will continue that cycle again because we've got some big projects that we really need to get done. So moving forward, my concentration will be with these approvals. I can start messaging that, not just with our Salem delegation, but all of those legislators as I'm out there having those conversations with them. We will continue to focus on legislative leadership. As everybody knows, that's the key to the game. They set the agendas. They decide which, as Representative Hoy knows very well, they set the agendas. They figure out what's going to happen, what's going to be heard, what's not going to be heard, and how we move that down the road. As we all know, we're losing a very key member in terms of the Senate president. That being said, we also sit pretty well when it comes to politics because we are in a couple really potential swing districts, right? So we have the opportunity to get that funding. We have the opportunity to help with those policy proposals that we want to see move on. So then we will concentrate right after the election on the new administration, building those relationships with staff. As we all know, those people have been around. So we already have some of those relationships with staff. It's just a matter of who's in that office and how we can be of service and help them make those policy and budgetary decisions down the road. We want to continue to strategically utilize our coalition partners, whether that's the chiefs of police, whether that's League of Cities, whether that's, work groups that have been started to deal with specific policy areas like recreational vehicles, et cetera, or whether that's OEDA, where we have members sitting on those committees like Sarah does with that group. So we will continue to go down those roads and try to strategically utilize all those relationships. Just real quick, a couple key dates. We've got legislative days happening right now. We've got the election on November 8th. We've got a revenue forecast on November 16th, which is very important to figure out our messaging around what's going to happen next session. We've got another round of legislative days in December 7th through the 9th. And then we've got a pre-session filing deadline on December 23rd. Now, I am I am not as stringent on some of those deadlines, as Mayor Bennett from serving, and as Mayor-elect Hoy. Those aren't set in stone. We can get bills at any time, anywhere, if that's our intention. But it also gives us a good roadmap of what people are going to be working on and what to look out for coming into the next session. So that's
Justin.
That's my legislative rep. Yes, Council.
Just FYI, in case you're not aware, the December legislative days will be in person.
Yeah, I was talking to which reminds me, I got to get back on the regimen here after Labor Day, try to get back into these suits. I was talking to Majority Leader Fahey, who stopped by on Monday when she was in town, and she was pretty encouraged that we're going to be in person in the building. So yeah, which I love in terms of relationships, but hey, I got to get these suits back on. So hard work starts on Monday, right?
Okay.
Thanks,
So
Mr. Mayor.
thanks, Justin. Is there, I think we ought to probably just move on to those legislative policy statements. Do you want to adopt those, just move on forward through those? Or do you have some changes you want to make? I assume everyone's read them.
I'm good with them. The only thing I would add potentially is just this, and maybe just to flag it for Justin, is this new issue. It's not really a new issue, but it's coming up lately with people being released from the state hospital to our jurisdiction rather than the jurisdiction of origin. It does look like there's going to need to be a legislative fix for that. So I know that there's a few folks working on that locally right now. I think RMG is working on it, and some others, but I think we should be a part of that conversation.
Yeah.
I've seen
And I
those
think it
issues.
may be a thing you'll want to work on when you get that sort of working group that's taking a look at the statutory construct that results in us getting them. That'll be, I think, an interesting. Yeah, Virginia.
Thank you so much. Yeah, reading through it, I was wondering if there was any stance that we take. I know we're a city, but we're having to deal with wildfires more and more. And I'm wondering if this, I don't know, because I don't serve on this regularly, but
Yeah.
is there something that we need to kind of maybe start considering putting in about wildfire preparation for cities? And then the only other thing that I had was the emerald ash borer. If there was anything out there, I know that that's new to Oregon, but if anything does come up, I know that we would probably have an opinion about that.
Yeah, and those are pretty good. Those are good broader policy or interesting policy issues. I think what we may want to do, or you may want to do, is watch for the kind of statutory response that occurs to those and see how those fit. I think they probably can be covered by the existing policy statements without having to call them out as precisely, but there's certainly things. I know I've been at a couple of events just in the past few days where both of those issues came up. at the state level. So I think you're hitting on the right note there. I think we'll see that, and we'll probably see some specific legislation, at least in Ways and Means. So I think that's something to be alerted to, Justin. Those are, I think, pretty specific concerns. Particularly, I think that wildfire after Vita Springs we're seeing just how close in it can begin to hit us. And we saw it close in West Salem, and we've seen it other times down at Illinois. So we're going to have to be prepared. And you may want to have the fire chief come in and talk with you about what policy changes would be useful for him. But that's a good call. Okay. So Chris, do you want to make a motion to just approve the policy statements for now, and we can move forward to the next?
Sure, I move we approve the policy statements and forward them to City Council.
Great. Any objections?
No.
Okay, great. Virginia, be sure to bring those up when this comes in front of council. I would just mention that there are some specific, particularly environmental policy issues you'd like to highlight.
Yeah.
It's a good way to do it. Okay. All right. What's our? Oh, the priorities. There we go. Okay, Courtney, you're on.
Thank you, Mayor Bennett. We discussed these priorities in broad terms when we last got together, and what you see before you in the packet are a little bit more of a refined sort of pitch, if you will, an example of what we might be putting forward when we're trying to ensure that this kind of funding can be available to support the city council's priorities moving forward.
Yeah.
So the first one is that River Road slide mitigation, and that again is a $20 million ask. And this is one of the projects that was considered as part of the proposal for the community infrastructure bond, but due to all the other competing priorities was put aside for a bit. And this represents an opportunity for us to advance it as a more regional transportation service serving communities to the west of us, including Independence and Monmouth and all the others. So, and those who commute to Salem for work. The other is the Peace Plaza renovation, and that's an ask that we had in the last session, and so we would be putting it forward again. You'll see the affordable housing fix, which is that Orchard Park example, and it was a proposal from the 22 session that didn't quite get over the finish line. There's also the photo radar fix that would just include Salem for the list of cities that could use that tool. And that's again a 2019 session revisiting an outcome that didn't quite go our way in 2019. We also have an interest in supporting what the Towing Association may be doing with regard to recreational vehicle demolition, so that there's a more effective tools for us to finance those kinds of demolition projects. And then you'll see a reflection. This is sort of my assumption of what I heard out of the September 12th City Council discussion. So you may advise a different approach. But what I heard was both an interest in sustaining sheltering funding that we've been able to receive and has really launched a whole new sheltering program on behalf of the city. And that's about $9 million a year. And then a separate ask for new programs, including the mobile crisis response idea and the sobering center idea. And where I think I was shy in pulling those together is I may have missed putting a specific ask on some of those. So we know it's about 2.1 million to operate the navigation center a year, and that's before we've opened, so it may be more. And then on mobile crisis, we're guesstimating, but it's about 700,000 to run the pilot in 1 year. It could be as much as 1.2 if we're talking or needing additional call operators at WVCC. And then on sobering, it's about 1 million, we think, for 2 years to operate the sobering center. And so those are the priorities that we've heard to date. And that's the slate that we would be putting forward for recommendation to council if you would like to do that.
Yeah, Chris.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not sure about the mobile crisis funding at this point. Just we had an update yesterday in the 988 rollout on 988 rollout in our behavioral health committee. And it seems like that funding is coming out already to the communities in that format. And I'm not sure that there's going to be appetite for programs outside of that. I feel like we need to be working on that 988 rollout and capitalizing on that. I mean, it's got its own call center. Northwest Human Services runs a call center for Marion and Polk counties. So I really feel like before we put anything forward on that, we ought to be looking fully at that program.
I agree. I agree with you. I think when you've got a program as what appears to be as robust as 988, and you're hearing about federal level funding discussions and other, I think it's important to kind of stick with the program as much as you can, and particularly with existing. I really hear what you're saying, Chris.
And the other part of that was news to me yesterday was that there are some, I can't think of the term they use, but there's some facility money coming out in the following year for folks where there would be similar to our psychiatric crisis center, I think, but maybe a little different, to help with places to take folks who, as a result of that. So I think that's something to keep an eye on as well.
Virginia, did you?
Yeah, I just wanted to support Chris in this. I think for me right now, and I talked to actually Counselor Phillips and I, who I'm filling in for right now, met and had coffee, and we talked about this at length too. Just really focusing on getting things in place, right? Like really supporting the navigation center and making sure that that is up and running and doing well. And then also getting that sobering center, I think, is another key part to, in the future, having a cahoots model in our communities, whether that's ran by a nonprofit or whether that's ran by the county, I think remains to be seen. But I agree with Chris, that kind of focusing in, laser focused on what we need so that we can hopefully get a better response and support.
Okay, great. It sounds like we've got three of us in the same place. Jose, any thoughts?
Yeah, you got four. I mean, I'm
okay, great. Thank you. The one other policy issue I think here, I think it might be, and I'm not sure how to word it, Chris, I thought you had a good way of describing it, but I think this question of return to county legislation, I think would be one that you really might want to get on your list and really focus very, very carefully on. That is a very popular issue here in Salem. It's one that has been discussed for decades and it appeared to be successfully working until some folks figured out that a guy who attacks a prison guard has committed his last crime in Marion County, maybe should get to stay in Marion County. I mean, there are certain legal implications and ones that might be able to be resolved, but I think getting that back into working order is a really good suggestion. I think I'd put that on your list. Just to
the other part of that, Mr. Mayor, is that if somebody's at the state hospital on an aid and assist, they're not able to aid and assist in their own defense, they're there for restoration. And then the charges get dismissed while they're at the hospital. Yeah. And then suddenly the hospital has no jurisdiction and they're saying, okay, well, you can walk out the front door. That's just an untenable situation. So
yeah, I think that's one that I would, and there's some drafting issues and all that going on and some research, but I would get that on your list. I think that's one that the public, as soon as they figure out this is under discussion, will wonder why we haven't got a strong position on it. And it's the return home is what you're after. Okay. Would be any objection to that? Maybe, and I'm not sure I'm wording it as precisely as you might want to word it, but the concept is this returning custodial folks here in Marion County to their home county.
May I just make sure that I'm clear on the proposal right now? So we're saying that the recommendation to council would include the River Road slide mitigation, Peace Plaza, affordable housing fix, photo radar fix, support of the towing association, sustaining the sheltering and navigation center, and seeking funds for mobile crisis, sobering center.
Right.
Excellent.
Those plus you had mentioned, did you mention the towing company thing?
I did.
Okay, I wasn't sure.
And
if
then
heard that right.
as I'm thinking about it, and trying to find the right place to tuck this idea about returning to
Well, there'll be a place. I think it's getting your language, yeah. But I think it's just making sure that the city is on record, that you all want to proceed either developing the legislation or endorsing, supporting, adding your name to legislation that accomplishes that goal of sending folks who are in custody here in Marion County back to their home county as they leave custody, and then appropriately, however that works. Does that make sense?
I think it would
Okay.
mirror the legislation that's in place about returning folks who are leaving incarceration.
Right.
So
They're not doing that now. That's the problem, is they found
Yes.
a loophole. Yeah.
Yes.
And Chris
It's
knows.
when the charges have been dismissed. They are doing it when a person has been is here for an aid and assist, and then they go back. They absolutely have to go back to their county. But it's when those charges are dismissed before a restoration, that's when we're running into the problem.
Good. Okay.
So I think we can do that. And what I'd like to just propose is that be called out in the staff report as another priority for the coming session.
Exactly.
Excellent.
Yeah. Okay, Virginia?
Yeah, I had a question about something else. And that is, Chris, are you planning, I mean, where are we at with the payment in lieu of taxes? I know that you brought it forward last time and you were hoping it would come forward again, but I don't know where you're at, and I don't know if this is the right time to ask you, or if, just
I'm
wondering where that's at.
I'm asking one of my returning colleagues to carry that forward, and they have agreed to do so. So you will see that bill come forward in the next session.
And you'll get a chance to endorse it, or, I mean, this is not the final list.
Okay.
It'll change.
Great.
Right.
Yeah, you'll add that, like
Right.
things like that.
And we'll see, excuse me, Mr. Mayor, and we'll see many, many more proposals.
Many more.
Once we start getting the first package and the first wave of introduced potential legislation. And then finally, if I can add just real quick, these types of discussions, I think, are really what kind of sets us apart a little bit. We've got these wonderful policy statements, right, which really act as a framework for me to be able to kind of move on the fly or see if something we really care about. But to both Councillor Stapleton and Councillor Hoy's point, if we can pull certain things out, not have to spend so much political capital on that, and keep this narrow kind of laser focus, as you both commented on, that just makes us that much more effective. And really, I mean, people need to look at the legislative cycle, the legislative session in cycles. Not everything gets done right away in one session. Some things take longer, but the more we can be focused and the more we're not spread out all over the map, the better opportunities we have both in the budget world and in the policy world. So thanks to both counselors for bringing that up, and it's just wise and strategic to do that.
And
Good
Justin,
advice. Okay, we're down to this authority to move tents and structures.
Mayor Bennett, if I could just add really quickly, in terms
Yeah.
of timing, one thing that we haven't said out loud, Justin, is that right now we're anticipating that the session might start on January 17, which would mean that the bulk of the stuff, the proposals, will really start showing up by the second week of January. And the pace becomes very, very quick, which is why, again, we like to have a foundation of policy statements heading in to the session. So
I think you will. If all this is adopted right away, you'll have that.
the plan is
Okay.
to take it on Monday night.
Good. How about this authority to move tents and structures? What's the deal there? What do you want there?
I'm going to ask that Mark just give us a quick update on the timeline for how we think we can achieve that within existing legislation.
As I previously discussed with this group, I believe the city has the authority, even in the confines of House Bill 3115. We are allowed to have reasonable regulations regarding time, place, and manner restrictions for sheltering in our public spaces. And I don't think that House Bill 3115 prohibits reasonable regulations regarding being too close to a dangerous roadway or areas where sheltering would provide increased environmental damage or might run us afoul of our obligations under our stormwater permits with regulations to federal government and state government. We are in the process of putting together a work group that's going to be spearheaded by Gretchen Bennett to bring together various departments within the city that deal with the issues related to our unsheltered population within our community, to look at our ordinances and any regulations and policies that the city may have, to make sure we're going to be in compliance with House Bill 3115. We are on track to meet that. The deadline under House Bill 3115 to have that all sort of polished and make sure we're in compliance with it is July 1 of 2023. And so we are working through that. These issues of locations to dangerous roadways, as well as within riparian zones where there's increased environmental damage, is something we're going to be looking at within that work group.
Great. Very good. So that is not one at this point that needs to be addressed legislatively. It's one that you see being addressed through existing rules or regulations accompanied by enforcement.
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
Yes.
So like Claggett Creek camping would fall into that, or what would be a kind of an example?
I think what we need to do is we need to take a look at what exists and then determine how, if necessary, we need to change things, and then what level of enforcement we can take. And if we need to change things in order to address these issues, I believe that it could be done on a local level, and that House Bill 3115 doesn't prohibit us from making the changes that would be necessary to do so.
Great.
Because where this started was a question was, do we need to make any changes as a result of House Bill 32 state law to give us the ability to do these things? I do not believe that House Bill 3115 prohibits us, as long as we can articulate a need to do these. We have our ordinances that allows us to do so, and an enforcement mechanism thereof. And that's what we're doing as part of this work group.
Sounds good. Look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you.
Okay, that I think that covers everything on our list. Is there anything else?
I'd like to be sure that everyone knows we're planning on bringing you back together December 9, and then we think it would be a good idea to meet in the second week of January as all of the bills begin to drop, and so that we can ferret out any things that we want to take sort of emergent action as the session begins.
Great. Okay, excellent. Well, if there's no objection, we're adjourned.